Each of these three battlefronts, election integrity, the transgender agenda, and COVID, are actually critical parts of the leftist agenda to impose Marxism on our country. And I think it's really important tonight for us to understand how this works. First, the left undermines our voting system, which is the bedrock of self-governance. They do this in order to rig elections to produce the results that will ensure that these leftist politicians have power essentially in perpetuity, so that voters cannot hold them accountable for positions and policies that are very unpopular. At the same time, the left destroys objective truth or destroys reality by telling you that a man can be a woman if he feels like it, and if you don't celebrate that, it's transphobic. You're told that you're a hateful bigot if you don't cheer for Leah Thomas, who is the biological man who still has male genitalia and dates a woman, but identifies as a woman and competes as a woman, breaking records even in the Ivy League women's swimming championships and destroying actual female competition and opportunity. Destroying objective truth and reality in this way conditions citizens to accept anything that the so-called experts, the experts, tell them. So then enter COVID-19. The same leftist politicians who rigged our election systems to give themselves basically permanent power and who tell you that you are hateful and bigoted if you think that it's unfair for a dude to win the ladies' races, these same people are now demanding that we hand over all of our remaining rights and freedoms to them in order to keep other people safe, or so they say. But this is how it works in a technocracy. You and I are not allowed to question the experts. And so that brings us, well, who are the experts? Of course, we're not talking about actual experts. Think about, for example, what happened to Dr. Robert Malone. Who is Dr. Robert Malone? He holds over 6 patents for inventing the technology used in the mRNA vaccine. You'd think he'd be one of the most prominent experts surrounding COVID, yet he was banned from Twitter. He was banned from big tech. Why? Because he sent a tweet questioning whether the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine was effective. Yeah, it's not. But why did Twitter care if a doctor with, honestly, with all due respect, a minimal social media following, why did they care if he claimed that the Pfizer vaccine was ineffective? Well, because Twitter and big tech are working in tandem with the left to suppress the truth about COVID, the truth being that the virus is dangerous to some people, maybe very old, very sick, very fat people, but in general, it's not fatal for the rest of us. Most of us have had it and been perfectly fine. But the left must suppress that reality, that truth, in order to convince people that COVID is so dangerous that it justifies the draconian power grabs by the government. So the experts are not the actual experts. The experts are defined by the left. The left, who has become the arbiter of truth and the arbiter of the arbiters of truth. That's why Twitter and Facebook banned a sitting president of the United States, Donald Trump, after January 6th. Remember, we could all hear President Trump's speech that day, or we could read the transcript afterwards ourselves. We know he did not call for violence. He called for peaceful protests. And when the few people started rioting, he told them to stop and to go home. Yet big tech banned Trump for inciting an insurrection. Why? Not because this was reality, but because the left used January 6th and their false premise about January 6th to try to abolish the filibuster in the Senate to ram through the Democrats' federal takeover of elections, which the left dishonestly branded as protecting our democracy from people like Donald Trump. That bill, of course, would have done no such thing. It simply would have federalized our election system to ensure that the Democrats remained in power in perpetuity. The same justification for the raid on Mar-a-Lago that just happened, the FBI raiding Trump's residence in Florida. It was not and is not about classified documents. It is very obviously a fishing expedition because the January 6th committee subpoenaed the National Archives for all documents related to January 6th in hopes of finding something on Trump. They want to criminalize Trump's speech about election integrity in order to criminalize your speech and my speech about election integrity so that they can cheat and rig elections and remain in power in perpetuity, and none of us will be allowed to protest unless we want to be called domestic terrorists or potentially face jail time. Are you following the pattern here? We see big tech as one part of this apparatus of evil, this trifecta of big tech, the mainstream media, and corrupt politicians, actively working to revolt against our established form of government. This is how this trifecta works. First, we have corrupt politicians who do bad things. Sometimes they do evil things. Then big tech swoops in and they censor the truth. They obscure reality. They prevent the corruption the politicians are committing from being exposed. They hide it from you. And then in this information vacuum that big tech has created, in swoops the mainstream media, peddling fake news, inventing stories, ignoring facts in service of the radical leftist agenda. My friends, this trifecta shapes our culture. It is effective. It conditions the minds of the people in our country. It impacts the outcomes of elections, and it threatens our constitutional republic.